educators, and I teach, and before I even taught, I would give talks at high schools, and I would say, my first thing I would say like, it's a miracle that I'm here, and I really meant that, because like, I mean, I don't want to go on record too much, but like the kind of things that I did, like I was really embedded in this violence of like gang violence, and having to make decisions if you should pull a trigger or not, or like how to start, like these really heavy things, right? That like that is just like, so I was like, it's a fucking miracle that I somehow, not somehow, there's reasons why, the support of my mother, my family, a lot of things, right? um, and then I switched my spiel. I was like, no, it was a miracle. It's actually, I feel that in a way, it wasn't luck, that it was perseverance, and that I'm here for a reason, and I could create change. But then I go back forth of those things, because it's like, it's also just like a lot of luck. Like, like
Yeah.
how do you? It's not like I could create a survival guide of how to make it out of the hood. I can't. Like, it was just a lot of chance. I remember growing up, and like I'd be afraid to take somebody like on a date to like Dairy Queen, because of the fear and the trauma that I was gonna have to like get into a fight in my neighborhood. Those are really realistic things. Like they're not kind of absurd, or like if someone uh, was trying to pick up my girl, like and like fighting, and so it's just like I always, and like,
Yeah.
it's just like I couldn't like looking, 34 Luis looking at 18-year-old Luis is like, that's really sad. Like I couldn't
Yeah,
even go get
that's
some
true.
ice cream, because I have to be really conscious of like
Hmm.
who I'm gonna see. One of the first like real moments when I realized how I could be in danger because of my body was when I went to undergrad at Southern Illinois. And what you were saying reminds me of this, because I recall having this sense of camaraderie, or this sense of comfort in seeing another Mexican or Latino. But um, it was this almost like, there's this sense of twisted logic, but also real, and or like not twisted, but maybe invented. I would remember having these conversations with some of my friends that like, there was this was my logic, that if somebody that was Mexican or brown was getting beat up by another race, that I would intervene, or if I was getting beat up, that I feel that even though don't get along with other, like even if I don't know the passerby happens to be Latino, that I will feel safer, or feel like they would intervene to help,
Hmm.
you know. And I'm kind of having difficulty in explaining it, because I also come from like fighting a lot in the neighborhoods to survive, and first like just dealing with bullies, and like learning that like learning how um, like striking somebody could actually be like this intimate moment uh, of where it's like aggression, but like when you hit somebody and like the look in their eye when they just realize that they just got hit, is this sort of like agreement all of a sudden that you're gonna like leave me alone now, and then we're not gonna tell anybody. I started picking up on these patterns,
Hmm.
connecting it back to like our art practice, and the idea of fighting, where it seems like the idea of like how to take a punch. Well, a couple of things, like how do you take a punch? Like I remember my boxing trainer be like, you don't become good at it. You just kind of realize that when you're dizzy in your head and your knees are buckling, that's just the process, and you don't freak out
Yeah,
and pass out. Like it's just
that's
like,
exactly
but
it.
but you don't like, your chin doesn't get any harder. Like your head doesn't get, like your skin doesn't multiply. Like that's it. Or like the idea of like that boxing isn't about winning. Like, I mean, if like professional boxing, like Mayweather and all these people, Canelo, like, yeah, that's about winning and pride and national pride and all that. But like at an amateur level, or at a street level, it's about like keep going. And I go back and forth reading like what's it called, the Labyrinth of Solitude, right,
Hmm.
with Octavio Paz, and this like what constitutes like being Mexican, and all this trauma and turmoil and fight inside us that doesn't let us surrender. Like sometimes I just kind of do want to just surrender. You know what I mean? Like
But
why? Like
don't you think that soft core, like that family moment, is the surrender? I mean, that's like why that's why like family and community and food is so important in dancing.
yeah,
And so like I think that that is the
Yeah.
surrender. Like that is the spot of vulnerability. Of course, we're always fighting like to keep
Yeah.
that thing, but like
But in a way, you just described like indoor places.
indoor
You know
places.
what I mean?
You can
Like
dance outside.
let's like I want to surrender. You know, like I don't you get tired of having to be vigilant or like having like in my work, I'm trying to always consider to unify, right? Like
Mhm.
that's my it's like unification. So it's like when I talk about how something happened to me and then me represents what I'm trying to represent me as, it's like it's not to say that to cast blame or to so for example for the MCA show, I'm talking about like in a way like trying to empathize with your colonizer in a way, or like when I was younger I used to get into a lot of fights, but then I also you know um, would win the fights. And also what happens when like there's no winning, right? Like there's like I remember I had to get into a fight. I didn't want to, but it was like they made me feel a certain way inside that I knew how to fix that problem. That was the only way. And then I would like at night I would just like cry, like because I felt so ashamed and so sad, of
Like
hurting
trapped.
someone.
Yeah.
So the idea is that it's not about just casting blame and telling people like making people feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So like if I'm talking about these Spanish colonizers or gentrification, it's not about like saying that white people are is wrong or they're bad or anything. It's about like having a conversation about unifying to empathize and to hear perspectives.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting the way that like part of this process of being like an oppressed body or whatever is like dealing with a lot of rage and anger and like upset, and then like you have to sort of move forward and past and with those feelings, or like sort of when people are like, yeah, I just want to like see like white people or white men humiliated or whatever, or like,
Right.
yeah, I think it's important for people to experience hardship, but like you don't want to turn around and become a colonizer.
In the work that I'm making, where it's about healing and about trauma, but also um, like stereotypes and talking and like taking agency of these things. And so I hate in a way it's such a common word to say this thing of awareness and conversations, but like now like working at the MCA, I've seen how powerful it is to do an artist-led tour, right, to students of color that are just excited to see. A common question is like, oh my god, do you speak Spanish? And then once they say yes, like, yeah, of course. He's like, oh, are you Mexican? Are you, like just like they're trying to like make sure of what they're seeing, right?
Yeah.
And so like I think it's to to create change in an institution that values or is an ally on what we want to see change. Because like in institutions, they have a lot of power, they have a lot of leverage, and that ultimately like you and I can only do so much, and we don't have support or a platform to where like museum by default is a place of education, right? Like that's why big museums have them. It's like considers great, you know what I mean? Like so it's like if all of a sudden you see artwork in a museum that is by an artist of color, that talks about these issues unapologetically and just there, then visually you start changing that. That's what it visually starts to kind of do. And I think that's why for me it was important to bring in like the performance I'm doing is back in my hometown of Chicago Heights, and they're I think like also fifth graders. Um, and so like now you move past like now they're in the museum, like that experience alone for me, it would be interesting to talk about these things at the show or afterwards, right? But like hopefully that is a resource that they wouldn't have, like that could be empowering.